All right, next we are going to go over child's pose and a couple of variations that I often recommend for my clients. So child's pose is a restful position. This is a position where you should not feel like you are straining to reach a certain, range of motion or degree of movement in your hips. This is a very relaxed pose. Be sure to grab yoga blocks if you need them, or blankets or bolsters. Okay, so we're going to come onto all fours. Now, let's start with your very basic child's pose. So, you would want knees hip width apart and your big toes touching. And then you're going to start to walk your hands forward as you sit your hips back and come down as far as you are comfortable and rest your head on the floor. So, this is going to look like your very traditional child's pose. There are two different variations of the legs that I like to do with this pose for clients. So the first one being for women who are in their second or third trimester and your belly is starting to grow, I always like to recommend, let's take the knees a little bit farther out. So I take my knees to the outer edges of my mat, and then I will start to walk down. Now, if you find that your belly is hitting the mat and that's uncomfortable, you can always stop where it's comfortable, and you can always kind of prop yourself up on your forearms and just relax down into this, letting your hips fall back towards your feet. If your hips do not reach your feet, that is okay. Another variation would be to place a bolster underneath your here so you can kind of relax on that. Or if that is not available to you, it's really easy just to grab a yoga block and rest your forehead on this and just kind of walk your arms out and just kind of rest into this pose. You see how I adjusted my arms to find the position that was the most comfortable for me. So this is with your knees significantly out wider than your hips. Another variation, this one I use much less commonly, but would be to take your knees back to that hip width, and then go ahead and start thinking about walking your toes to the outside of your mat. So both knees, I would say, are pretty symmetrical on the mat, and then take your feet and kind of walk them to the outside of your mat. So you're getting a really awkward angle at your hips, most likely. And you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, this feels very wrong. But it's okay. So this is working on hip internal rotation. And then we're going to go ahead and sit back into that. This might feel a little strange, but that's okay. And then sit back into this pose, and we're just going to work on breathing. You may go all the way to the floor. You may not make it very far at all, and that's okay. Once again, for this, you can place bolsters and pillows where you need to. If you feel like your hips are not making it to the ground, but it feels really strange, you can always add a block for support. I'm kind of guessing my height here. Yeah. And then kind of rest on that, and then come down. That's just for added support in case you need it. And I would probably add a block here as well for my forehead, because that would be most comfortable. So that's a child's pose with your hips internally rotated. Now, let's remove the blocks. Now, if you want to do any variations with your arms, if you come down to that child's pose again, you can have very relaxed arms. Your arms are just relaxed, they're not working, you're breathing into the pose. But some people like to get a little bit more of a stretch through the lats. So you can bring your fingers into this spider. Call them spider fingers. A little bit more active. This helps me get a little bit better thoracic extension, in my opinion. And if you want to take this even a step further, you can also add, I like to use my yoga blocks versus spider fingers. So you can have them on this height or this height. This height is going to be easier. This height is going to be harder. So I obviously would make it symmetrical, but I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes what this would look like. So you see how this hand is coming up higher, and that's going to give my lats more of a stretch. And you might feel this more in your shoulder as well. So that's one way to get your lats more with a child's pose. And then there is just the good old traditional right and left bias. Or you can walk your hands to one side, sink and breathe. So if you're going to the right, you're actually opening up more into the left side body. So you want to think about sending your left hip back, left fingers farther out. So you are creating a long, long line. And then, of course, you can go to the opposite side. And you may be going in the left direction, but you are stretching the right side body. And those are all of my favorite child's pose variations.